voice. Hey girls, hey babies. 眠れないなら目を開けて。うちら超絶素敵なナイスなバディに壮絶無敵なナイスなマイン勝ち犬の遠吠えは街に響き渡り日々の入ってるねまた破けるまで 876543210 カウントダウン楽しむマリランソーとかちょっとライト
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast. This week, or whenever you're listening to this, we have a special Pride edition of our usual show. With me today, I have Tori.
Hello.
And we have a special return guest with us. We have Meta, the writer, fanzine editor, gender abolitionist. They recently released Rebirth Dilemma and Evangelion Fanzine and are currently working on the Onigiri Miya cookbook, a haiku fanzine.
Hello.
Hello, Meta.
Hello, I'm happy to be here again.
Yes, we're glad to have you back. It shows that we're not so terrible that we can't get a return guest.
Yes, you've truly achieved something.
And we also have a new guest of the podcast. We have Salvatore, a.k.a. RetroSofa. He is a Cutie Honey expert and a webcomic artist behind the comic No More Mermaids, which you can read at topus.io. So, hello, Salvatore.
Hello, thanks for having me on. Super excited.
We're excited to have you on, and I'm kind of glad I got you too, because I completely was just like, I follow this guy for Cutie Honey stuff. He's gay. Maybe I should ask him to be on our Dog and Pony show. I mean, I've literally, like, just sort of, like, cold called people, and I'm very surprised when they're like, sure.
One fear. Hey, that's what podcasts are.
Me going up to people and be like, hey, do you have an hour of your life to just waste?
Yeah, I have somebody that I've been dying to reach out to for an episode for, like, 2 whole months now, and every time I think about it, I start sweating and have heart palpitations, so...
I'll do it for you. So the fanzine is all about, like, hey... I like your art. Will you please do this thing that is going to require a lot of time and minimal compensation for you? And
okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk.
People are down for it.
So like I said, this is our special Pride Month podcast. So last year we had a Pride special as well. We interviewed David Wald about localizing LGBTQ anime, and you can listen to that. I'll put the link for that interview in the show notes. But this year, I wanted to do something different. This is actually what my idea for last year was before we got David on. So all of us here in this Discord call that we're using to record this, we are all LGBTQ anime fans, and I personally feel like anime and manga and Japanese media has a unique relationship to queer fans, especially those of us who grew up watching it in the States. And I just wanted to get like a round table of various identities who are also fans of this content to come and kind of talk about how it has influenced their identity, various series or characters that have special meaning to them, and just like what it means to be queer in the anime community, because it is a very, very complicated relationship that we have to navigate, negotiate all the time. So with that, we're just going to break into the discussion, and I'm going to ask... starting with our guests, because they should get priority, how did you get into anime? And we'll start with Salvatore.
So I'm sure a lot of gay men could probably say this. I got into anime because of Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon wasn't my first anime. I saw plenty growing up. There was something called like The Littles that aired on Nickelodeon. I've seen The Little Mermaid. I've seen Speed Racer. But Sailor Moon is what really like got me into it, and that's what like led into, you know, going to conventions and reading manga. So yeah, it all started with that pretty sailor soldier. And
how about you, Meta? How did you get to anime?
That's more or less the same the same answer. I think, you know, I've said this before on the podcast, I'll say it again. I came home every day after school and ate my sandwich before going to figure skating practice for 2 hours. And it was usually Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z, or Pokemon and Sailor Moon, or Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon on Toonami. And man, Sailor Moon was my hero. So it just started from there.
And Tori, we'll go to you next.
I think the common theme here is that Sailor Moon is brainwashing children.
Yes.
Because other than Pokemon, like Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura are the two that I have the most vivid memories of. And I was like, well, if I can't, go on a nationwide journey at 12 with cute little animals, I guess I can be a magical girl, maybe. So kind of similarly, that's where I started too.
I feel bad because as big of a Sailor Moon fan as I am, I actually did not watch the original, airing in the States at all. My journey with Sailor Moon completely began with watching fan subs of it online in later years of high school. I think it was because it came on, maybe at the point where I was aware of, anime that was airing on television. It was on, later at night on Toonami. My first anime was probably Dragon Ball Z, which I'm also kind of really into, but people I think forget because I'm more into magical girls. But I watched DBZ every day after school because my older cousin, who I think he had a weeb phase, but he doesn't want to talk about it because he was really into Dragon Ball. And he was also an only child who got everything he wanted, so we got the cast-offs of his stuff. And he had the tapes. I know he had a dub of the Tree of Might on a VHS, and he had the Final Bout PS1 game, and so we got the cast-offs of that, and that's how I got into anime, is through vicariously through the stuff that he kind of either gave us as a hand-me-down or kind of showed us when we were younger. And then when I got older, I wasn't so much into it. It was a thing I saw when I was younger, watching Pokemon and the like. And then when I got into later years of high school, I told my therapist that getting into anime was my rebellious phase, and he just laughed. But that kind of was what it was. Is I thought getting into anime was doing hard drugs. I was suddenly on the streets or something because I was watching Ouran High School Host Club. I thought it was a badass.
It's all on late at night, and you're doing something that your parents don't necessarily know about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No.
I mean, I don't think it's impossible to say that a lot of the early anime, early quote unquote, the anime community that we kind of came of age in, the
90s, kids.
Yeah, because I was born in 93, so I'm kind of probably in the middle of the age range with all of us here. Mm. But that mid-aughts to late-aughts anime fandom, which was, very hot topic, very edgy, very, Effervescence just plays somewhere on a loop in that world. I think I didn't have a goth phase, but getting into that did feel kind of I'm doing something kind of illicit or wrong.
Well, 2000 was kind of this big anime boom for America, because that's when I feel companies are starting to realize kids will actually watch this. I mean, people don't realize that around that time, I mean, you could see anime anywhere. It was on WB11, it was on Cartoon Network, it was on Nickelodeon, it was on Wham. It was all over the place.
And a lot of that, too, was just the money, because it was so much, cheaper and easier to just redub something that was already animated and aired somewhere else. I mean, Power Rangers kind of proved, hey, we don't have to make original content. These kids will eat this crap up.
Sadly.
Sadly, look what happened.
But the 90s dubs were so, even if, I don't know, I'm just thinking back, the 90s dubs were so charming and had such a nice life about them, even if they were... they were not true to the original, or they were not culturally relevant. That, I don't know, I'm glad that I came of age in that kind of anime environment, just because it really highlighted kind of how goofy but also how serious those shows could be, which felt really different from cartoons. The normal Western cartoons that were on, which are all either macho men or really girly girls, and awful.
There's just a whole generation of children who have grown up without hearing Usagi wail, "Oh, Darien," and it shows.
Oh god, I can hear that so vividly. Or without, I rewatched the Digimon movie the other day, and those people clearly had so much fun just making their own script.
Oh, it was wild.
And being these kids have no idea what this food is in front of them, so we're just gonna call it a potato milkshake.
Donuts?
Jelly donut, anyone?
Yeah.
I had a friend recently, I think like just a week ago, he just started watching Sailor Moon, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, dude, I said, you're older than me. I said, you didn't watch this growing up? He was like, I think I saw an episode or two. And like, I think I let one of the dub terms slip out. I was like, yeah, well, the Sailor Scouts. And he was like, they're the Sailor Guardians. I'm like, wow, the tables have totally turned on me.
But then there was also, I especially remember for Sailor Moon, and I was talking to my friend about this. I'm not sure if I knew this when I was a kid or if I'm just reading this into myself in retrospect. Like, Zoisite and Kunzite, and then Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune, it even though the studios clearly tried to brush all of that aside or, tried to make it something that would fly under the radar. Like, those gaps in the content you're being delivered and then the source content, like, I think that was such a fascinating and I think that has a lot of parallels to fandom. Like, translation is in its way a fandom. And just seeing those opportunities, even if, you weren't cognizant of them at the time, I think is really empowering as a burgeoning LGBTQ youth. LGBT couth. There we go.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll delve into this more because I'm sure Sailor Moon is going to be discussed until we're all tired of it. But I remember, even as a child, I don't think I was quite intuitive enough to realize that these two were supposed to be romantically involved. But when I started getting to them showing up more and it was like, oh, we're cousins, I was like, I have a lot of cousins and we don't act like that.
Yeah, your kids are smart. Something weird is going on. Weird used in a neutral term. But that something is being communicated to you in a way that's not necessarily accurate or true. And
exactly.
As someone who grew up in Oklahoma and
oh my
which
God.
is the quasi South, that especially is a I can never remember if I'm allowed to curse, but that is especially a fucking experience.
And I think kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, and
yeah.
I feel kind of children growing up now with this new wave of cartoons here in the States, and even anime as it is more prevalent now than ever on TV. They are more than capable of handling complex themes.
Yeah. Steven Universe.
100%.
I would have loved Steven Universe instead of Sailor Moon. Anyway, I'm not going to make inflammatory statements.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the censorship in the original Sailor Moon dub, because as someone who got into it through the subtitles, through the original Japanese, I actually kind of embarrassingly got into Sailor Moon because I was looking for gay anime content, and when I found out, I was like, oh, Sailor Moon, the first season has two villains who are gay and in a relationship with each other, and that is a major part of their characters. That's the entire reason I watched it, was I'm just I am hungry for characters who I can identify with. Yeah. And even though Zoisite is in the first American dub, they change him into a woman, into a heterosexual relationship. Even the fact that there is a character who is undergoing a gender change, there is still something weird. It's
it's
now
transformative.
It is, and now that we have that context of the reason why they changed it and the fact that the character was changed, it's this is, instead of a censorship, it's just making this character even more queer and even more
it is its own queer.
It's interesting with Fisheye in the original dub. Fisheye got a similar treatment. Fisheye became a woman in the Cloverway dub, but Fisheye still appears physically male. And it's funny because even though I'm sure that totally was not their intention in Canada, they kind of made the character more progressive, because in a way, Fisheye is a little bit problematic, although all of the Amazon trio kind of are in their own way. And in a weird way, by making Fisheye a woman, I felt like it was kind of making it more I don't know, more progressive in a way, because you can say without a doubt that Fisheye is a trans woman in the Cloverway dub, whether they intended that or not.
Yeah, because there is that scene where it's the one where Fisheye is targeting the fashion designer, and Fisheye rips off the dress that they're making, and you see a male-bodied chest. There are no... It is very clearly, animated that way. They don't censor that. At least in the DVDs, the terrible bootleg DVDs of Supers that I had in high school that I bought off eBay from China.
But
for $10.
they still call her a she and everything.
So it's
and she even makes comments. She's like, "Well, I'm different."
They
know?
do.
And I don't know. It's like they were kind of getting things under the radar. I mean, the old dub was very interesting because they would censor things and then do other things. Because if you like listen back to like Sailor Uranus, she says really gay stuff in the old dub, which is really cool. Like they don't try to hide that. They're like, okay, we'll do all the cousin stuff, and then she's still gonna flirt with all the girls.
I think to kind of take this into the character who came to mind is it Mr. Him in the Powerpuff Girls? Is that?
Oh yes, him. The
him. Yeah, Mr. Him. I don't know him, but
put some respect on his name.
Please. Hey, you should respect him. He's great. But this is an interesting conversation because this like inherent queerness to kind of bringing over. I'm academic at heart, so I'm using stupid words. But this like the queering of content by virtue of bringing it from another culture and another language into like an inherently different corporate culture with different corporate priorities and a different language. I think you can kind of see the influence of the thinking of that behind in is it Hanna-Barbera? Like those cartoons from the early 2000s. Like the Powerpuff Girls is like super anime influenced at its heart. I mean, it is kind of like a Sailor Moon for like very round-headed, short children. Anyway.
I mean, but that is an interesting concept, the idea of, like, queering just by nature of translation, of trying to decipher or contextualize meaning where meaning was not meant to be deciphered or contextualized, like taking something from one language that was not necessarily meant to be marketed to the speakers of another language and still trying to kind of force a square peg into a round hole in a way.
Or sometimes, and I think you kind of mentioned this, Sully, so forgive me if I'm repeating, but sometimes I feel like when they try to censor like any LGBT character or content, sometimes they make it so much more prevalent that they kind of accidentally uncensor themselves.
Yeah, they draw more attention to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you couldn't be a fan of anime or Sailor Moon on the internet in the 90s at all without being reminded, hey, they're gay in Japan!
I know. Oh, gosh.
And that's just such a lovely way of thinking, about fiction too. I'm speaking as someone who's really rooted in like the fan creation space. So just knowing that even the source content, like people get paid to like fuck with the source content, like great. Like we can do anything, right? We can make it anything.
I remember the big hubbub about when one of the newer seasons was released, like the whole re-release with the new dub and everything. And in the character dynamic book, they even tried to, in the year 2019, because I think it was last year, allude that once again, these two were just friends and not lovers.
Oh,
and
I
I'm
remember
like,
this.
do you really think people are going to let that slide? This was the hill to die on for decades. People are not going to let that happen. And I think it was actually during Pride Month as well, and I really don't remember, but I know there was a huge uproar about that, and they actually released a statement going, sorry, we weren't paying attention, but I don't know.
I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt with that situation. I'm just like, maybe they got a translator who they saw the word and maybe they were just like, oh, it's probably just like partners or something, and they just do not know who these sailor people are, and it was completely innocent. Like, that's the only thing I can think that happened, because that dub has like gone out of its way to be like, Kunzite and Zoisite are in a relationship, Uranus and Neptune are in a relationship, Fisheye is a very queer character that we can't really put many labels on cleanly. These characters are the way they are, and we're not going to hide it. And I can't think that they were trying to censor it. It has to be like a dumb mistake, like they said.
Yeah. It's just like translation business, and someone who should be editing, not editing very well.
Yes.
And then I'm thinking of like other characters who maybe they weren't explicitly queer, like Uranus and Neptune, But when I was a little boy, I loved James in Pokemon, and he's basically just, the dub makes him into Paul Lind, and he cross-dresses, and I love that thing on the internet, and I don't know how true this is, where it's like he has a collection of the things you take off of soda cans, and they're like, oh, in Japan, that means that's the boys you want to kiss, and I'm like, okay, I get that. Move.
So that's what all the, like trucker boys were doing in high school with monster tabs.
Well, queer
Okay,
characters have always kind of been around in cartoons. I mean, they were always just kind of coded. Because, I mean, like, I was rewatching Ren and Stimpy, like, last year, and I'm like, I can't believe how gay they were. Like, they were so extremely gay. Like, they slept in the same bed together, and, you know, I'm trying to think of, like, other examples. I mean, there's other characters that, like, you know, they have, like, you'll see, like, a male character with, like, very effeminate tendencies. Like, they're totally supposed to be gay, but then you never say anything about it. It was, like, a very don't ask, don't tell for cartoons.
Which is the problematic part.
Yes.
Yeah, especially, like, queer-coded villains like Jafar or Ursula being based off of Divine, or, like... It's just like
every Disney villain is gay.
Every Disney villain. And, like, I once mentioned that in a graduate-level class, and everyone was like, I don't get what you're saying. I'm like,
oh, no.
Am I on candid camera? Like, you can't look at Shere Khan and not be like, who is this you know, flaming homosexual? Like, that's just... These characters are so... Like, there's such a long tradition of equating, like, men who are morally wrong with effeminacy, and that has kind of been a thing in anime too. Like,
I think the only positive, not explicitly stated Disney gay relationships, Timon and Pumbaa, and I'll die on that hill.
Oh my god.
I mean, you have, like, what, Nathan Lane, like, right after the birdcage doing that voice? They could not have known.
What a relationship ideal. I've never thought of that. That's genius.
I forgot how we got on the topic, but last night Austin and I were talking, and it just boiled down to, remember when Simba had 3 dads?
Another kind of, I don't know, yeah, let's go with it. Another queer representation that I remember actually being impacted by when I was a kid was Tsukasa in Dot Hack Sign. I don't know if any of you...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so Dot Hack Sign being about, you know, people in this massive multiplayer online role-playing game getting stuck in the game. And ostensibly, it's about this boy character who gets stuck in the game, but it's revealed that the person playing them in the real world is a girl. And just that, like, little disconnect really has, like, stuck with me for, 20 years now? Oh my god. And just the idea that this is going to sound basic and stupid, but just the idea that you can, like, present yourself as someone more like yourself online versus presenting yourself in a deceptive way or covering yourself up online, which is what my parents always thought people were doing online.
I think that's a good point to kind of go into the next topic thing I kind of wrote down, which is what series or characters hold meaning to you, like, as a fan, or what are some ways that manga and anime specifically have influenced your identity as a queer person?
I didn't realize that I started identifying in other ways probably until about maybe middle school years. I kind of suspected it when I was younger because I always caught myself, like, looking at girls more than boys and things like that, and I will say that I have, like, no concrete definition of my sexuality. I used to kind of say, like, oh, I'm pansexual, but then apparently that became a very problematic way to identify amongst a lot of people. So I guess my thing is kind of just, like, now, as I've gone through the years, I just understand that I like people if I like them, no matter what they identify as or how they express themselves. And that's just kind of how I've come to feel about it over the years. But,
That's lovely.
Oh, well, thank you. But going back to the media influencing, of course I had that very strong attachment to Sailor Moon because I thought there were other things going on there that my little baby brain could not quite piece together yet. I would spend hours on AOL watching Cardcaptor Sakura AMVs because I was just like, it's really weird that Tomio, like, is just so into Sakura. I wonder what that could mean. Because that's not how friends act. But I guess as I got older, probably, mid-middle school, I found Ghost in the Shell, Standalone Complex, and I saw the major, and I was like, oh my god. Like, she's cool, she's badass, I love her. Even if she wasn't those things, I still would love her, but just seeing her not, kind of like you said, Meta, she didn't have to accept her body and was able to kind of have her more idealized self. And I mean, there's a whole, like, issue with that kind of, but they actually erased some lines in English when they dubbed it about her confirming her bisexuality in Standalone Complex.
Yeah, it's really upsetting.
I know, and if I remember it correctly, it's one of those vague lines of just like, I just like whoever, which, I mean, it's fine, but, and then the real, comeuppance was when I started playing Final Fantasy X-2, and, I don't know.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I do not know what it was about that game, but I just kept playing through it, and I thought it was so fun that, like, the cast is basically all women.
Yeah.
You get to play dress up, and to me, that was so cool.
It's like girl gang road trip.
Yes.
Right?
And I was just like, I think I'm gay. So, I mean, but that's kind of how I contextualized it around that time. But any type of character, I think, that can sort of feel comfortable in the body that they want to present in, kind of really strikes a chord for me, because I necessarily feel like I can't do that. Even trying to adopt in, like, gender neutral pronouns and sort of present myself a little less femininely, and it still just doesn't necessarily feel right with me, but kind of living vicariously through those characters who get to do that, I think has just caused me to really latch on to some of those works. So
that's I totally feel you with the kind of question mark of gender presentation. Yeah, it's so fucking fraught, and it's, I don't know, I mean, I come off as a very feminine, like, dainty little woman, so it's just, I don't know, it's fucking fraught. There we go.
Yeah, and
go on.
It's frustrating because society has such a clear definition of what is and what isn't passing.
Yeah.
And I try very hard to not look at people that way, because I just remind myself of, like, everybody is in a different stage. You don't have to fully, go one way or another to have that respect that you deserve as a person. But I think my biggest frustration is just it's like, you either have to look this way or that way, and that's the only way we'll accept you as passing.
Well, that's the gender abolitionist part of my of my bio. I know it sounds really, like, dramatic, but it's from the Xenofeminist Manifesto, and it's just like, fucking free people from this stupid binary that, like, governs our lives, and just let them be, like, them in their own sense. And I to kind of take the torch from Tori, like, you in Stars Align recently was, I think, the first time I've watched an anime and said, like, oh, that is me. Like, that, I think that's the first time I've watched an anime and seen not just, like, my struggle with, like, gender identity or sexuality, or LGBTQ issues, but just how rooted Akane Kazuki made the conversation around you in existence, in, questioning, like, what your purpose is, and questioning like what you're supposed to do in the world. Like that's so much bigger than just like, well, do you like boys or girls? Do you identify as a boy or a girl? Like, it's just like, that's not like, it's like, you know, after 6 years of doing religious studies, it's like, people will still ask, like, does God exist? And it's like, that's a really boring question.
Yeah.
Can we not? Like, that's a really boring question. And especially, I don't know, I've only recently really taken up the non-binary flag, and my sexuality is, like, the biggest question mark ever, and I'm fine with that. Which, Tori, like I said, I love, like, you're attracted to the people you're attracted to. Like, who cares what, like, group they fall into if you don't want to care about that?
And that... Sorry,
on.
not to cut you off, but I think that's personally taken a lot of years to sort of accept, because back when I was younger and kind of going through all this, like, my preference was women, or other, how do I phrase this? Or just people who identified as, like, a non-cis male. And now, for the first time in my life, I am in a long-term relationship with a cis male, and that's kind of presented, it's going to sound so bad, but this has kind of presented another set of issues.
Yeah, that doesn't sound bad. It sounds true.
And I legitimately have had people that I considered friends stop talking to me because they're just like, how could you do that? That's traitorous? That's not the word. Maybe
You should read Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl. I know should is a bad word. My therapist has told me to stop using it. I know this isn't about anime, but everyone should read Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl. It's about a person who can like literally change their body to match their gender.
Wow.
And they kind of navigate these issues. But anime, sorry. But yeah, anime, I think it's taken me so long to like get, like, I'm 29. It's like, I should have this fucking figured out by now. And I just kind of boxed it up until really recently. And I think it's partly because there's just been no kind of visualization, representation in media of people who kind of break out of, no honest representation, no like proud representation, who break out of this very silly binary that governs our world.
Right, and I think it's easy to say that it's like, oh, it's okay to not have it figured out. But I know...
but it sucks.
It does suck, and it brings in, like, a lot of internalized feelings that sometimes don't manifest in the best way. But I just try to remember, like, if I can see sweet, old 90-year-olds finally at the point where they've, like, transitioned and are living out the rest of their life comfortable, like, I'll get there when I get there, I guess.
It's about the journey and not the destination.
Yes.
Tell me now. So...
Salvatore, the same question to you, because I feel like I'm trying to make sure all of our guests get equal billing and that I don't talk too much.
So for me, Uranus and Neptune were definitely, that was like the first like openly gay couple that I witnessed in animation. And I remember reading, there used to be this website called Castle in the Sky, and they had episode summaries of Sailor Moon S like a couple of years before the dub came out. So I was like caught up, and I think that's when I like found out what a lesbian was. I know it sounds bad, but I remember like going to my mom and be like, "What are lesbians?" And she had to explain it to me. And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I'll never forget being 10 years old watching the dub on Toonami, and like I think for like 5 episodes they like kept it up in the air if they were like still, you know, lovers or not, and then the bombshell happens, like, oh, they're cousins, and it was like, oh fuck, you know, I remember screaming at my TV. I was like 10 years old, screaming at my TV, and then I don't know. I mean, like, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. It was being a gay kid. It's like I always knew that I was gay, but I didn't really know. And like it's kind of like if you guys have ever seen But I'm a Cheerleader. And she's talking about, like, how she has posters of women up in her locker and how she doesn't like to make out with her boyfriend. She's like, I thought everybody has thoughts like those. Like, that's kind of how I was as a kid. Like, I was only, like, checking out guys. I didn't think anything of it. I was still like, oh, I'm going to, you know, grow up and marry a woman or something. And in middle school, I started having like otaku friends, because like before then nobody really liked anime that I went to school with. I was like the anime kid. And then I met all the yaoi fangirls. I don't know if that's problematic to say nowadays, but they were all mostly straight girls who like loved yaoi. I remember thinking it was like ridiculous, and I would like read their manga, and I'm like, this is so shitty. And then I remember thinking, I didn't say this out loud, but I was like, why are they so into like effeminate men? I'm like, because like Shishomaru was really big for them, and I was like, you would think they would want to be with like a burly guy who's like, got a hairy chest, and then I realized I'm like, oh, I'm describing what I actually want. But yeah, that was like kind of like my gateway. I was like looking up like yaoi adaptations of like manga that I knew about. But the first I think queer series that I saw that I like kind of like heavily identified with was Stop Hibari-kun. The lead was born male, but like presents as a female, and is the heir of a Yakuza family, and their family brings in this straight boy named Kosaku, and Kosaku has like a crush on Hibari, but then like is like conflicted about it because he's always just like, she's a guy. But I don't know, like when I watched that, I thought it was really cool, because I'm like, well, I can tell that Kosaku and it really does care for Hibari. He just is kind of like dealing with, I don't know, like probably his own sexual identity. And then Hibari's relationship with his father really struck a chord with me, because his father, like, it would drive him crazy, because he would like call him like a hentai. He's like, hentai orome, like, yelling at him because he's wearing, he's presenting as a woman. But at the end of the day, they still love each other, and he still cares about him. And it just like, I don't know, it reminds me of like when I was a kid, and I was always like a very like gay kid, whether I knew it or not. And it would drive my father crazy that I like loved mermaids, and he would spoiler, this is where the comic title comes from. He would go, no more mermaids. He goes, perché mermaids, no more mermaids. But then he would still buy them for me at the end of the day. Like he would, and I thought that I always like identified that with Step Hibari-kun. And it's funny because when I got into Hibari-kun, this was like 2005. I was in high school, and I think someone fansubbed like 2 episodes, and the rest were just raw Japanese online. I would like watch it, and I had like a tiny fan base of like American fans who were like, I can't understand this, but this is cool. And now like in recent years, like someone's fansubbed the entire thing, someone's translated the entire manga, and I think that's incredible. And it's mostly well liked. I mean, it's very problematic in areas. There's a lot of things that are like very like have not aged well. But like a lot of queer people that I know in the community, they really love it, and they really identify with Hibari a lot, and I think that's really cool. Something else I was going to say about this. This is slightly off topic, but still regarding Hibari-kun. So Hibari-kun was born male and presents as female, and so there's always like been this like how he's a very queer character. Hibari is a very queer character, much like Fisheye in Sailor Moon, where you're not sure like, oh, like how would you identify that character? Because I always identified Hibari as male and gay when I was a kid, because that's who I wanted to identify with. And now, of course, like nowadays everyone, they call him a trans girl, which seems to be the most appropriate. And I thought it was interesting because the author made a statement, and he said that he made Hibari because he's frustrated that he was not born a beautiful girl. And I thought that was the coolest fucking thing I have ever heard. I was like, because that was such like an openly queer statement to hear from like an 80s mangaka. I was like, wow, I was like, that's really fucking cool. I really like, Hibari was like that really, I don't know, helped me with my queer identity, I feel like. I mean, I wasn't openly gay until much later, but that really, like, I feel like that helped me, like, kind of be like, it's cool to be queer.
kind of a childhood trauma story. So when I was a little boy, again, my older cousin who lived next door to us liked Dragon Ball Z and got us into it, and my favorite character was Frieza. And one, that's very gay. As I have argued, it's like Frieza is one of the most queer-coded villains, and no one wants to talk about it because it would dare bring like a major threat of like a queer villain into the series. But pink and purple, looks like he's wearing lipstick, like very feminine in Japanese, like that overly polite sort of, you know, a little too foppish in Japanese, and then played by a woman for the longest time, an old woman, like the joke about like gays and old women in English. Like, I loved Frieza, and now I'm looking at it, it's like, Frieza's basically like a gay power fantasy. Like, you're this tiny little effeminate alien, but you can kill everyone who makes fun of you.
Oh god, I wish.
God, what a mood. But when I was a little boy and we were younger, like, we would always, like, want to play Dragon Ball, and, like, my brother would be Goku and my cousin would be... And then I was like, I want to be Frieza, and they're like, no, you're Chi-Chi because you act like a woman. And that belong... And they...
I love Chi-Chi.
And incorrectly, they would say, because Chi-Chi means woman. So that's why we're calling you that, because you're a woman. And that was, like, a huge thing for me, is I never got to be the gay character because I had to be the woman that no one also liked. Like, I didn't get to be cool Chi-Chi with the helmet and the laser. No, I had to be the stay-at-home mom who everyone makes fun of. Just for doing her job and wanting to raise a strong family. And that was probably one of the first moments, like, Frieza and James, I think, were the two characters who, like, looking back, like, the fact that James gets to openly cross-dress, and it's never, like, seen as a weird thing, necessarily. Like, James in, like, the Swan Lake tutu outfit, because I was also a painfully effeminate child. Like, my parents did not know what to do with me. Like, I had a mermaid phase too, but I was obsessed with Ursula. I wanted to be an octopus more than anything. So it's like, not only does he want to be a woman, he wants to be like an old octopus woman. Like, what does, like, Dr. Spock has no advice for that.
Mine was fairies. So.
Fairies?
Fairies.
Oh.
Yep.
I was a unicorn child.
But as I got older, so it's kind of interesting. Like I said, I was into anime without really knowing what it was. Like, it wasn't like, I'm specifically into animation that comes from Japan. It was just, like, I like Pokemon, and I also loved Clefairy as a child, which, again, more questions. More, son, why do you have to like the frilly pink thing? Why can't you like the Pikachu like all the other boys?
Clefairy's fucking awesome. Clefairy's a caregiver who can kick ass.
And they're from the moon. They're aliens.
Yeah.
It was very, very my aesthetic, like a pink thing from the moon.
Clefairy aesthetic. I like it.
But when I got older, I kind of didn't get into anime. Like, I never got into Naruto or watched anything like that. Like, I was very into, like, Batman and old TV shows. Like, I became very other gay. Like, musicals and sitcoms from the 60s gay. And then in high school, I started dabbling in anime. The first one I watched, like, this is an anime and I'm watching it for that purpose, was Clanad. And then that occurred right around the time I started figuring myself out. Like, I had a huge crush on Tomoya in Clanad, the main boy, and I didn't know it was a crush. I'm just like, I like this kind of boy. I wish he would be my friend. Why do I also wish he would kiss me? I don't know what this means, because I never thought I would grow up to marry a woman. I thought I would just grow up and be by myself for the rest of my life, which is probably also something else for my therapist to work through with me.
What a mood, though. Like, that's agreeable. Mm-hmm. I feel that.
But yeah, so I started, like, getting into anime right around the time I started figuring out, like, oh, I am attracted to men. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because it was also the time where I'm like, I liked pretending to be a woman a lot as a child. That might mean something. And dealing with, like, gender issues, because I personally do not identify as non-binary at this stage in my life. I usually just tell people I'm a man in quotation marks, or I'm a man if you squint hard enough, like, stuff like that. But I was always, like, very, like, I want to be a man sometimes, I want to act like a woman sometimes. Like, make-believe for me was, like, there is no, like, boundary between wanting to be the Joker one day and pretending to be Catwoman the next day. Also, wanting to be Catwoman, another thing my parents were very concerned about. But, and then when I got to anime, there were all these characters, like, and looking back, they're terrible stereotypes, like the whole, like, evil villain who's a cross-dresser, but for me, that was so empowering, because it's like, these characters, they dress the way they want, they act the way they want, and they're not, like, it's problematic because they are, like, being very non-consensual, but for me, it's like, they even say, you, man, I'm attracted to you, like, I think you're sexy, and it's not, like, it's so unabashed, and I kind of guess I needed that, like, the whole, like, I like the hot guy, what's wrong with that? Like, it was kind of weirdly empowering.
We stand himbos in this house.
We stand himbos. Like, I always make fun of people on Twitter who are like, this is my anime waifu, but when I saw Promare, I was like, you know what? That is a himbo of the highest order, and I'm here for it. It's like, that's my type. Like, just, you know, handsome and just completely and totally dumb.
I'm glad we finally have an alternative to the waifu.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, based off of kind of what you were just explaining, I think when we're younger and trying to figure things out, we sort of, like, take the crumbs as we can get them. And that's a joke I always love to make. I'm just like, oh, Disney, the crumbs, I'll take them.
Yeah.
I really thought Elsa was gonna be a lesbian in that new movie, but that's okay. Thanks anyway. But I think as we get older and we have a more formulated understanding of these things, and sort of how, like, we know we need to be portrayed as people, you kind of just see, like, you understand more, rather, I guess, that's like, okay, I can look back on that character I was severely attached to as a child. I understand why, but I also understand that, like, that is not the best representation of me as a person or my life as an LGBT person, but I think that's kind of a good way to contextualize it, I suppose.
Yeah. I struggle to even, I mean, I just brought up him, etc., but I struggle to even, like, I feel like a fake queer when I say this. I struggle to even, like, think of, like, who I identified with in these terms as a kid. Like, Tsukasa was obviously one of them. But the other ones, the major ones that come to mind, are the nobodies from Kingdom Hearts.
That's valid.
Yeah, which is, I laugh and it's hilarious, but it was because, you know, I, like, my dad died when I was 12, and I didn't want to exist, and that's a great starting point from which to really explore your adolescent identity. And then it just became, like, the shell of appearance. So even though we have a long way to go, it is nice that we've come some way. It's my hopeful and vague addendum to the problematic portrayal discussion.
And maybe for me, like, I still love a lot of problematic characters. Like, I will not go into a full conversation even though it's there, but, like, one of my main things is, like, people who know me, like, Sully's really into Rocky Horror, and Rocky is very fraught, but I love it. And, like, whenever, like, I was just watching a movie, Never Too Young to Die, which is, like, this terrible, like, parody spy film with John Stamos, but you have Gene Simmons playing, like, this evil, like, intersex drag character who's basically like, let's take Frank from Rocky and make him dumber. And I was like, I love this. I love how stupid, and I kind of like how offensive it is. Like, it's making fun of people like me, but there's something weirdly empowering of, like, these people think you're terrifying. Like, they look at you and they think that you are, like, proof that God no longer looks at us with pity. And I'm like, yeah, that's very fair.
I think, and this is something I personally struggle with a lot. I think we can sometimes take away some merit from something that's problematic. And, you know, there are some things out there that are just like, okay, that's too much, and maybe we shouldn't engage with that. But I feel like, I mean, nothing is wholly innocent, and, you know, I like a lot of media that I can find a lot of problematic things in, but at the same time, it handles a lot of heavy subjects well. Like, my go-to for that example is, like, always the Monogatari franchise, where it's like, yeah, it's a little over the top with some of the salaciousness, but you know, they handle characters who are you know, LGBT, or they handle things like assault in a very decent way given the rest of the material. And I don't know, I think there's merit in that. Sometimes we can walk away from things that are a little bit problematic, finding some sort of comfort or some sort of goodness to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, it's an ongoing conversation, because sometimes it's not even grossly offensive, it's just like, this is the understanding that we had at this time period when it was made. Like, I remember, I don't know if I was, like, into anime, or, like, when, like, it was roughly around that period, but I don't know if it was when I was, like, purposefully seeking anime out, but Ovation, which I found out still exists somehow, it was the art channel, they had their month of animation. Their month of animation, they showed Tokyo Godfather subbed, and I loved Hannah, and I know that she is not a perfect example, but I did not, at that time, when I was probably only like 12, have the conceptualization of trans identity, but it's like, this person has a male body like I do, but they don't act like other male-bodied people do. I really am invested in who this person is, and, like, just having her be dubbed by a trans woman now when the new G-Kids dub, like, having it put on Blu-ray, like, I was really happy to see this Hannah love fest when G-Kids got the license. I'm like, I'm glad this character, who's only in one movie, like, I saw it on TV, and I remember being so upset because I'm like, I don't know why this person means so much to me, and I'm like, I now know. It's like, this is, like, a fledgling, like, possibility model that I'm crafting, like, my own narrative on top of.
I was gonna say, on the flip side of that, however, I was doing some research early today, just kind of looking at, like, what the internet thinks are, like, good portrayals versus, like, bad portrayals of trans people, or just, like, the community in general. But, needless to say, I found out that, I know there was a lot of hubbub about a transgender character in My Hero Academia, which I'm not a huge fan of that show anyway, as I have stated many times. But the one character, I think, whose name is Tiger, the author wrote that character's bio nothing more than formerly female until he took a trip to Thailand, kind of, like, cheeky. Like, it was written kind of cheeky. And I'm glad that he did not misgender the character in the latter half of that sentence, but I just feel like that's such a antiquated stereotype to have in, like, this decade by now.
I still have friends that make jokes like that, like, because that was obviously before the pandemic happened. I had, like, a lot of friends that would, like, Thailand was, like, the spot for them to go, and whenever, every single one, my hand to God, I'd be like, oh, can you bring back a souvenir? And they would always say something horribly offensive. I won't repeat it, but you can figure it out. And I'm just like, seriously, guys? I'm like, it's the 21st century. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, for me at least, being involved in, like, fandom and kind of the anime community, not just, like, the LGBTQ. I can't say the acronym.
Bacon less tomato.
La 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 la. LGBTQ community. There we go. It is, like, and especially now that I live on the coast, like, it is really unfortunate how a lot of the progress is really uneven. Especially, like, when you look at Japan, too, in important ways. And it's easy to forget that the world has not, like, moved along with you. Not to be depressing.
But it is. It's super frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I often say, like, the anime community, another part of my coming out was actually, like, coming into community where, like, going to a con where there's people in bizarre costumes and some of them are in drag, and there are people, like, you see same-sex couples, like, just walking around, like, doing their thing, living their life, like, that's very empowering. And then the flips, and you think, like, in that mindset, I was like, you know, this community is it must be so open-minded, because, like, look at all these queer characters, look at all this wild, like, stuff you don't see in Western media, like, it must, and it's like, oh, no, it is, like, you have some of that, and then, like, I have a Twitter account, I see, like, I cannot open my Twitter without seeing someone say something awful, or, like, saying, you know, people like that do not belong here. So it's a very, like,
really
like, I see it a lot. Like, maybe it's because I don't even personally follow drama. Like, I do not tweet my political opinions on Twitter. I do not, like, I purposely try to curate spaces, like, compartmentalize that, and I still see, like, a lot of, like, I kind of see two things. One, like, gays are icky, lesbians are mean, and transgender people are icky unless they're, like, ugu waifu material, and then it's my kink. Like, that's pretty much what I get a lot of the time.
That fucking sucks.
Yeah.
I don't.
One of the things I thought was super cool, this might be slightly off topic, but because I before all this happened, I was able to go to Japan at the beginning of the year, and I spent most of my time in like the little neighborhood that they had, but there was like a lot of love for like bigger guys. Like there's like bara art everywhere. It's like all like Gengoro Tagame. I thought that was super cool because like, you know, being a gay man, it's you kind of come across like bad stereotypes of like them being superficial, like you're supposed to be fit or masked, and yet you have in Japan all these like posters and all these like kind of chubby gay guys being celebrated. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, you know, I was like talking to guys on Grindr over there, and I like didn't feel like self-conscious or anything about my body type. I thought that was super cool because I know that like Japan might or anywhere might not be the best with acceptance or, you know, being progressive within the community, but I remember that just always like stuck out to me and was like, that's really cool.
And
that's lovely.
And it was kind of the opposite for me because like I often talk about like my conflicted, like complicated feelings about yaoi, but as someone who does not, I will say my entity is basically I do not strongly identify with masculinity or maleness. And in the gay community, you have two roles. You either get to be a drag queen or you get to be the funny best friend on a award-winning sitcom. That's basically it. And it was really interesting in yaoi, like as problematic as having very clearly defined, like this is the man and this is the woman in this gay relationship. Like it's like, oh, it's nice to see like non-masculine, effeminate men being told they're beautiful and desirable and not like... you know, fuck off twink or whatever. Like, it was also kind of, for me, like, a lot of Western gay media was, like, muscles and being a man and not being too gay, or, like, if you are too gay, like, you're a sexless, like, undesirable entertainer. You can make us laugh, you can, you know, be a performer, but we're not going to see you as necessarily, like, a romantic partner. And then you have yaoi, which, problematic as it is, it's like, you have these big-eyed, cutesy, feminine ukes, and they're like... hey, we think you're hot. Like, we think that the fact that you're not exactly the traditional definition of masculinity is what your attractiveness is. And for me, that was like, wow, maybe a man could think I'm beautiful for who I am. I was proven wrong, of course, but still.
Like yaoi opened up the definition of like masculinity and maleness for you?
I think yaoi and just anime in general did. Like I go back to Oron. Like Tamaki is a heterosexual cisgender man, but he's very like if you did not know he was attracted to women, you would think this is a flaming homosexual. You have Ranka, Haruhi's father, who is a bisexual drag performer. I think that a lot of anime, because the men tend to not be... Like, you have your Fists of the North Star, you have your JoJo's, although that is...
and what's wrong with it?
And what's wrong with it? And then you also have a lot of characters who, you know, the Bishonen stereotype is very feminine, and it's kind of like that, like, all British men are gay to Americans thing. Like, I think also a lot of men think all anime men are gay because they are... less like traditionally Western notions of masculinity.
Yeah.
I think that opened like a lot of it was a double-edged sword, because at the same time I found empowering, it also gave me body issues that I still grapple with. Because I am no longer a, like, frail 19-year-old, and I have to come to grips with that.
Yeah, bodies are problematic.
Yeah.
No,
you go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm kind of surprised, actually, that Kurama from Yu Yu Hakusho hasn't come out. Does anyone, I can go on with that statement?
You go ahead. It's been so long since I've watched that show.
I rewatched it a few years ago. Actually, like, made a lot of my new, like, fandom best friends, that sounds so, nice. Social, through rewatching Yu Yu Hakusho. But my
friend Alicia.
Say it again?
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say, the only person that I really know that, like, ever really, really loved Kurama was my friend Alicia. She's a big time fan of I forgot the author's name. Is it Togarashi? He's married to Takayuchi, the creator of Sailor Moon.
Yes, but, I don't know his name.
She loves all his work, but like she used to be such a Kurama fangirl, and she always talks about it. It's like something I'm so obsessed with, because I think when Geisha was coming out, she was reading it in real time in Japan.
Oh,
but
cool.
She's the only person I ever like thought of, and I have my other friend, a very good close friend of mine, Steve. He's also gay. Yu Yu Hakusho is one of his favorites, but he never like, I don't know. I mean, him and I are like night and day. Like, we have completely different taste in men. I mean, I would totally date a guy like Yusuke or Kuwabara, and he is like he likes that big cat guy, one of the Saint Beasts. He likes bears, but yeah, no, Kurama I don't think has ever come up with me and like my gay friends. I don't. It's always been like yaoi fangirls or like Bishonen fans.
Yeah, I just remember, like, Kurama being this, like, clearly, like, effeminate but fucking badass and, like, very smart
and the
person.
roses.
Yeah, and just being like, oh, can
and
I, like, I do remember distinctly like, thinking as a kid, like, oh, can I, like, be that? Like, that sounds neat.
And, I mean, even with the roses, like, bada is, like, a slang term for gay in Japan. Like, badazoku, like, the rose tribe means, like, gay men. I mean...
Interesting.
I wonder what that says about Tuxedo Mask and Fiore then, but, we'll let them figure that out.
Well, Kurama's, this is another thing my friend Alicia brought up. He's influenced a lot by Saint Seiya, like that author, because that author made a lot of, like, these shonen characters, even though it was still such a macho series. But if you read the manga, if you see Saint Seiya, it's very, like, theatrical, and like there's flower petals everywhere.
Yes.
But you wouldn't think anything of it. But I remember hearing like years ago that it was like very popular with like BL circles. I think Clamp or somebody used to like do doujinshi based on them. Captain Tsubasa was like another one that was similar.
Oh yeah, I recall that, and I will I think. Whatever. I'm a writer. I write fanfic. I got sucked into the whole yaoi shit show. I wouldn't call it that now, though. I'm fine with this being problematic. I don't know how I feel about it. But I think part of the Kurama interest, especially from a writing perspective, though, is like exploring the concept of like, if you're like 10,000 years old and like a demon, like what the fuck does gender mean to you? Like, who cares? Right? So... I don't know. Life is a series of complex choices.
Mm-hmm. I will say, though, and I was thinking about this over the past few days, I feel like the offerings have become a little bit better, because I feel like as I was growing up, especially in my teen years, if you wanted any stories that dealt with these things, it was either straight pornography or it was just messy, not exactly well thought out writing. Of course, there are, gems within the times, but I feel like now you see a lot more stories delving into not as many represented, or not, hold on, how do I want to phrase that? I feel like you have more stories now pointing out underrepresented identities. Like one of the ones I want to mention later as like a story that provides good representation, like they delve into characters who identify as asexual and things like that. So that's not really something you started to see as prominently, I feel, until more recently.
Yeah.
So the next discussion question I had was, what unique roles do you think that LGBTQ fans play in fandom, and what are some of the challenges we face in particular? I think we talked about some of this, but I'm sure Meta, being our sort of fandom liaison, probably has a lot of opinions on this that they want to go into.
Do you have like 3 hours? Man, I'm rubbing my face because, like, I don't fucking know. I think it's been good that, like, I mean, all of this is qualified to the end of the universe and back. I think it's, and I mean, I also don't have like I feel like I don't have a huge claim to any kind of platform, because only recently have I really like been like, oh yeah, I'm queer. Like, I'm a queer human being. I'm not, avoiding this question. I mean, I guess avoiding the question is like queer in its own way. Avoiding the question of yourself if you want to get into angst territory, but I'll spare the podcast Heidegger. Like, the fandom, it's been good that these companies are recognizing that people like want representation and want like more diverse stories. I'm glad we have a lot of shows on major networks that aren't about, cishet white people. Steven Universe always comes to mind. It's exceptional, obviously, but even She-Ra and
Yes.
the Avatar, the Legend of Korra. Is that the correct ordering of those words?
Yes.
Okay, not the Legend of Avatar Korra. I think fandom has had a good influence, but I think within it, I just think that like, my biggest pet peeve is just the infighting over gender binaries. Like, it's, seeing ostensibly, I mean, who I assume are straight writers arguing over, like, who's the top and who's the bottom. But that's, like, that's just a perpetual problem, I guess, in all humanity. But just, like, when I read fan fiction from a writer's perspective, it's just how much we rely on, no matter how you identify, no matter who you are, just like, it's upsetting and problematic how much people rely on very cookie cutter shapes for experiences and the people who live them. It's upsetting. Like, creation is about examination, so let's do a better job.
I feel so detached.
I'd be interested to hear from Salvatore too, since you're an artist.
I was saying, I feel like detached from the fandom. I don't know, because I don't know, because maybe it's because there's not really like as active as a fandom for like this series that I like, or maybe because I just stay out of it. I mean, because I'm like barely in the Sailor Moon fandom anymore, just because like it's a little ridiculous.
It's pretty small nowadays. Yeah.
I think, well, one of the things that has always like kind of like bugged me with that is that I feel like a lot of times there's like a very forced narrative from fans. Like one of the, like, especially like with Sailor Moon, like there's so many people that because there's a message board that I still go on every once in a while, and like they'll just ask the most ridiculous questions, and they'll say like, do you think that maybe you can consider that so and so is considered this, that, or that, or like, and it's like, okay, this was a 90s shoujo manga. Obviously it was progressive in some areas, and it dealt with a lot of like strong queer themes. I said, but like, I think you're really overanalyzing or like really forcing like a narrative on it. Like, there's still so many people that talk about like Usagi and how she thinks that Rei's pretty when she first sees her, and they just like run home with it, and it's like, I just think it's a little too like you're trying to see something that isn't there, and it makes me think about like in the early 2000s, people used to argue that Uranus was Christian because she wore a crucifix. Like, it's just that I just think
that's a new one.
God.
It's kind of like this forced narrative, so that I don't know, and it brings me back to which I kind of like mentioned earlier, like when I discovered yaoi, it was like through girls at school who were mostly straight, and they just they had like this weird like fetishizing of gay men. And there was one girl that I went to school with, and I swear to God, this is a true story, she had a crush on a guy because she thought he was gay. And then when she found out that he was heterosexual, she like lost interest in
She
him.
didn't like him anymore.
I
Oh
couldn't-
my god.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was just, it was so,
Yeah.
it was so bizarre to me.
It's demeaning.
Yes.
And like, sorry, as a writer, like that's demeaning to your subject. Like, sorry, I don't mean to.
Yeah, no, it was pretty, yeah.
It's just demeaning. It's not good.
Yeah, it reminds me of somebody I used to be friends with who was a very radical yaoi fan to the point of like mild fetishization. And it got brought up in the conversation one day about how she was literally consuming all of this, doing the thing where it was like intensely reaching to justify things that weren't necessarily there. And literally uttered the sentence, "But yeah, I think lesbians are absolutely disgusting."
Oh my god. Yeah. That's so I think like from a if you're labeling me the fandom correspondent, whatever.
I'm so sorry I've given you this terrible burden.
Yeah, the cross I bear. No, it does feel like
Does that mean you're Christian?
that's the fucking question too, isn't it, man? I don't know after that Evangelion zine. Maybe I am. Where was I going? Oh, yeah, just it's not just the lack, and I think maybe, I don't like blanket statements, but maybe this is a good blanket statement. The lack of awareness where the source matter ends and where your analysis and your kind of running with it begins, I think, is the problem. And the lack of awareness of where, when you see these like really horribly written, like, slash porn fanfics where it's like, oh, one of these male characters is like an author insert, and like it would be fine if we recognized it. Like, it would not be fine, but it would be a lot better if we were just like, yeah, I'm using this, especially from I think I'm a political woman, no matter how much I identify as non-binary and don't really like my uterus, etc. It would be fine if we just had this recognition of, like, writing, like, I know I'm speaking to two gay men, but I think your bodies and your sexuality, like, male sexuality is inherently less fucked up than women's sexuality, because no one taught me that I had a clitoris, and, like, what? But, like, if we recognize that yaoi has this weird and perhaps not great use of women being able to, like, explore sexuality without, like, womanhood, like, that might be a little better, but no one does that, so it's fine.
To kind of go off that, like,
I'm open to criticism, by the way.
I agree with you,
Yeah.
because I always tell people I have a very complicated relationship with, I prefer the term BL just as a general thing. Even yaoi, using the word yaoi here has been like, wait, I don't know. I have a very complicated, and one of that is, like, I think the people who are anti-yaoi, like, I've noticed that fewer gay men are actually, because I think most gay men do not know what the hell it is. Like, I think if me and Salvatore were both to go into, like, a gay bar and be like, do you know what yaoi is? They would all look at us like we had just beamed down from Mars. Like, no.
Usually they just say hentai.
But
like, when I give people my comic and they read it, they're like, is this hentai? I'm like, no.
It's not,
I was going to say, to backtrack slightly, off of that comment that I had made from that person, you always see it on the flip side too. Like, cis men completely objectify the hell out of lesbians as long as they fit into their preconceived, like, conventional beauty standards. Whereas, like, if it's a more masculine lesbian or if it's a gay man, they're just like, absolutely not, get away from me, I hate you. So
it's about, I mean, like, speaking from the writer's terms again, it's just about this. It's, like, really upsetting to see people not letting characters be, like, fully human.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong, like Meta was talking about, like, the idea of, like, this is an expression of, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with, like, some, like, dumb, young teenage person like writing dumb fanfic because they're going through their awkward period. Like, I can.
Hey, you're talking about some people here.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
yeah,
I should.
like that's,
Oh no!
I have no problem with that. Like, I do not necessarily have a problem with female identified people who enjoy like the gay male romances or sexual encounters that happen in BL or yaoi. I think my issue comes with like I think it's sort of a like middle ground thing, like not getting so like caught up in it and being okay with it, and then also like not. I think I was reading a comment from someone who is a gay man who is doing like actual academic research on BL. Like, a friend of mine linked me to his research and to his Twitter, and I agree with something he retweeted. It's like the anti people are just as bad because a lot of it seems like it's more. It's, again, I see very few gay people identifying as gay or bisexual or like men who love men. I'm seeing less of this. Like, I think you're just mad at these people that you don't like, not necessarily angry on the behalf of the community that you say they are oppressing. And I also say, like, again, when I was a dumb teenager, I preferred reading stuff that was closer to that because I felt like I personally, only me, was better represented by this content than I was seeing in like Western media, where again, like the gender binary in a lot of BL is reductive, but sometimes it can also be like, if it's weirdly empowering when you're not someone who identifies as entirely within a masculine paradigm. Like, it's kind of nice to be like, there are pretty boys in anime, maybe I could be like that, and that could be my model of expression. Maybe I don't have to be like a jock or whatever to feel like I belong in my identity.
Yeah.
I think it kind of boils down to an empathy issue as well.
Yes. Sorry, that's exactly where my head was going.
Okay,
Go
good.
on.
Same thought. I feel like hetero people just look at gay or however identifying other than hetero people as just objects. It's like, they see us nothing more as like hypersexual beings that are just objects. And I was watching a video earlier about there was this guy, he lives in Japan, I believe he's half Japanese, but he made 2 separate videos where he interviewed straight identifying people, and then he had a video where he went to the one of the larger Pride festivals and interviewed LGBT people. And most of the younger kids were pretty open-minded, and there was even a mom who was like, I think the character of my child is more important than their sexuality, which we love to see it. But one of the younger men that they interviewed, them and an older pair of gentlemen were very surprised that like 1 out of 10 Japanese people identify as LGBT or other. And to me, that seems kind of low. I just feel like people aren't honestly reporting those numbers. But to go back to what I was talking about.
Or they might not have the spot on this survey that is them.
Yes, and that's also very true. But one of the younger men was just like, I don't know how to identify with a gay person, or I don't know how to relate to a gay person. And, that just boils down to basic empathy. Like, you are supposed to, on some level, try to understand people who are different than you. And I feel like, especially in media, if you can write these characters very well, if you can make them strong and not just dumb their personality down to like, I'm gay, I'm trans, maybe that'll kind of help alleviate the issue. But like I said, I think it just all falls back down onto a level of like, people do not know how to have empathy other than in situations where it makes them look good.
Which isn't really empathy.
That
Exactly.
reminds me of something Salvatore was saying, like, the people in fan forums who are like, do you think possibly considering, it's like, I get the need to read into characters, but I'm very into, like, death of the author. It's like, yeah, if you want them to be, like, if you want this character to be gay, go ahead. If you want to be trans, just do whatever.
It's my literary analysis, and I say who's gay.
Exactly. It's like, you kids, I know you're looking for the crumbs. I've been there too, but, like... It's not that, like, it's that deep and also not that deep, and I feel like I also will be like, if you want these characters so badly, like, writing is both very easy and very hard. Like, sing the song in your heart, be free, little songbird. Like, do whatever. I see so many people are like, I need this character in this show that I love to be exactly like me. And my answer to that is, maybe what you have here is you have a character inside you that you need to be creating. Like, I hate when people are like, if you want something, just make it yourself. But at the same time, I'm like, it's very easy to just try.
But not even so. Yeah, so I, as a fan, I'm totally like, there's such a value to someone at corporate Disney just coming out and say, yeah, Elsa's like a lesbian. Like, that is like a real moment of recognition. But as a creator, like, when I write like my original fiction, it's like yeah, if you put me under like FBI interrogation and like ripped my fingernails out, I'd be like, yeah, fine, I'm writing about a non-binary character. But people on the, like, when people ask me that, I don't like want to answer. It's like, what do you see there? Mm-hmm. What do you get from it? What does it tell you? Like, what do you want it to be? Like, works aren't, I mean, the word author is a shitty word because it implies authority and like this person telling you like, I think author is like a really outdated word. Actually, that's my new hill. I'm gonna die on it. Like, I die on every fucking hill I find. I just have hills on hills on hills. But I think author is a really outdated word, and the beauty of kind of an archive of our own is really elevating this concept of transformative. Like, creation is about making a place where people can inhabit and play and build their own understandings, not only of like the world inside of that creation, but themselves and what they take to the outside world. So yeah, the like, we must interpret this way, and it must be this way, and it must always be this way, and anyone who says it's not this way is wrong is like, so it's just so fucking boring. Mm-hmm. It's fundamentalist. Like, it's like the same as the Bible people. That's what I call them.
It's also one of those things where I'm like, you know, they might not say Elsa is gay, but don't we all just kind of know? Like, isn't that just sort
Elsa's
of like
pretty, yeah.
It's one of those. It's like, you know, do you need Disney's? Do you need the mouse to tell you?
Yeah, how to think? Yeah. Like, what is that actually gonna do if they come out and say that? Like, I mean, it might scandalize my uncle in Oklahoma. And like make him think the world is coming to an end, which I always like it when he thinks the world is coming to an end.
I always love those things. It's like, I want this character to be queer so my parents will love me. I'm like, no parent is going to love you because
because Disney made a queer character. Yeah.
It's like, I get like the fact that media like portrayals of queer people like do help educate people in a roundabout way, but never have I seen someone be like, I hated my gay kid until I found out that Snow Woman from the Disney cartoon was a lesbian.
And damn, do I want my kid to be like the Snow Woman from the Disney cartoon.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want to be Elsa?
The sort of last two questions I have, we're going to just kind of combine them into one, is like, how can we make the fandom like a more open and accepting place? And I think we've touched on that a bit. And what are just some anime or manga that you recommend, like, for either their explicit queer themes or their readings therein?
I have a Twitter thread on this that I wrote, and I've already forgotten what it says because I wrote a Twitter thread on it. I think people just need to stop thinking that people are coming after them all the time and that they're coming from like a negative place. And I think this kind of goes as a broad topic. Like, I think the fandom community is pretty accepting on an LGBTQ level. I don't think it's like accepting on a fundamentally human level. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think people need to learn how to have empathy. I think people need to learn how to like take criticism and grow, and they need to learn that there's not you don't just, you're never going to reach a place where you're good. Like, you're never going to reach a place where you're like, you never need to change again. Like, that's unfortunately, it just isn't going to happen. I think people would grow a long way. That's not a sentence. I think people would get far if they just let themselves be a little more generous. So that's my prescriptive bullshit. Do you want me to answer the second question?
Sure.
2? Okay. Stars Align. Everyone should watch Stars Align. It's great. Not only for you, who's this beautiful like depiction of non-binary exploration and like a refusal to he doesn't even really claim the term non-binary. He claims the space to question, like, and I'm saying he because I'm a fucking idiot. They claim the space to question, like, who they want to be and who they can become. And obviously, even LGBTQ people aren't immune to falling into their own bad habits as they were raised. Stars Align. .hack sign, just because it's such a life in the early 2000s was online. Life now is like way more online, and I don't think the people who made .hack sign like anticipated that. I think they thought they were making a fantasy. Ghost in the Shell, definitely. And just anything that like speaks to people, they should watch it. And if they think it's LGBTQ representation, like, they should feel fine thinking that, even if people tell them it's not.
Salvatore, same question. How do you think we can make the fandom a better place? And is there anything that you recommend people watch or read?
I think it boils down to just being more open-minded, being more accepting, being more educated, I think, is the biggest thing, because it still bothers me how much problematic language I see fans spewing. I had a friend confess to me that he was attracted to trans women, but he didn't use that term, of course. He used a very outdated term. And, I had to explain to him, like, that's not, and then I also had to explain to him, like, you're kind of fetishizing and, so I think that fans just really need to benefit from just educating themselves. This goes for fans or non. I think that companies in general are also doing, like, a better job just being more aware. I think, like, watching the type of language they use. One of the other things that I do is that I do subtitle checking for Discotek, and surprisingly, and I always forget about this, a lot of us are actually queer on the team. At least 3 of us are. And our one subtitler is very, is very careful about, like, language used, because there's, if you guys are familiar with Mazinger Z, there's a character that is 1/2 male, 1/2 female, and they were always very careful about the type of language they would use. There was I forgot, I don't know if it was Devilman or if it was something else we used, but they used the term okama, which is kind of like this weird kind of derogatory umbrella term, and like trying to figure out how to translate that was like interesting, because I think originally they had it as just gay, and I'm like, well, it's not really, but like you don't want to say like fag or something. So I think what I did was I settled on homo, so it gets the point across. It's not the best thing to say, but it's not terribly offensive. I think even something came out recently with Funimation, like people were giving them slack because they translated something a certain way. Yeah, again, I'm like totally like detached from the fandom. I can't like, I went to Anime Expo like 3 years ago and I only went for like panels, so I can't like, I don't know, I'm so like not involved. So since I'm clearly rambling at this point, let me go to my recommendations. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Stop Hibari-kun is a really good manga and anime with queer themes. There's a lot of like things that have not aged well, but it's still really good. It's and Hibari is like a great character. Hibari is probably my favorite like queer protagonist. Another one, which I'm so mad I didn't discuss this earlier, is Tezuka W manga. That one was a really big deal for me. Like I love that. I'll try not to talk too much about it, but I got into it when I was in college, and like I was still like kind of just not sure if I was like okay with being gay or not, because I was like in that weird area where I was like, oh, I'm gonna say that I'm bisexual, so I'm half normal, because that was young virgin Salvatore's mentality. But MW is great. It's essentially a Hitchcock film in comic form. They have two queer characters, Michio and Garai. They are literally the worst human beings in the history of fictional characters. Like, they are terrible, terrible people, but goddamn, they are good characters. So definitely recommend that. I'm pretty sure it's still in print. It's really good. It's very gruesome, so there's a lot of intense material in it. And then another one I want to recommend is it's not, again, it's totally like dumb. It's totally like a guilty pleasure. I love his favorite. That's like the only like yaoi I've ever really gotten into. I think it's very cute. It's very funny. I like that the main love interest is a very unattractive young man. I think that really sells it for me. And then finally, it's like the one Gengoro manga that's not like graphic. Why can't I remember it?
Is it the one like My Brother's Husband?
Yes, that one. It's the one that that's the one. Highly recommend that. That one's very heartwarming. It's very good. If you have any shitty homophobic relatives, you should buy it for them because they can learn a thing or two. But yeah, I think those are probably my recommendations.
I cannot believe we went this entire podcast without mentioning Baron Ashura from Mazinger Z. I feel like I committed a grave sin.
I because it's so weird. I don't know. Well, it was funny because I watched the Transwar Z dub the other day for the first time, which was like the really heavily 80s edited like dub for it, and like they address that he's two different genders. It was surprised me. They don't use the best phrasing. They refer to him to like is both. I think they call him like a he, she, or something like that. Something so weird and outdated. But they have this great line, which I do really love. He's both a man and a woman, but the worst of both.
I want that on my business card.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Baron Ashura in Mazinger Z, I don't think it's a spoiler, is literally two characters. One character who was a man and one character who was a woman. They died, they brought them back to life, and Frankenstein the two halves of the two different bodies together into one character. Which is a very dumb go-to-guy thing, and I love it. I don't know why I love it. It's like, this is so me, because it's like gender ambiguity in the stupidest way possible. Tori, your recommendations both for improving the community and stuff to read and watch.
Stop arguing with shitlords on Twitter. Because you are just giving them traction, essentially, and I know there's a very dark and very depressing side, especially on the internet, of like anime fandom, and they're always thinking we're pushing an agenda and whatever. I say pick up an American comic book and then we'll see who has an agenda. But I think just being nicer to people, and I think that's kind of the resounding sentiment that we've all shared, and kind of give people a little bit more of a softer space to grow. Like, I, for instance, get very frustrated whenever I see, like, 12-year-olds running around with, like, the trans flag on their back, like a cape. That's not always my favorite thing, but, if they're young and this is how they're already feeling, yeah, this might be a little odd, but if that gets them to the place where they grow into the person that they are, that's fine by me, sure. But I think just being kinder is sort of the bit of advice we should use for everything. I'm big on empathy. But I guess for recommendations, I've not really been good about reaching out and looking for content. I definitely have a list of things that I want to like knock off. But I would really recommend Our Dreams at Dusk. It's a 4-volume manga.
Yes.
You can get through it really quickly.
And then sob like a little kid at the end.
Absolutely.
Jesus.
The artist is actually identifies as X-gender, which is kind of like the non-binary term in Japan. And they basically said they used a lot of like their personal experiences, either theirs or people they know, to sort of write some of the scenarios that happen in the story. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it kind of ticks off almost every identity in one way or another, which is, I know, important to a lot of people. This one is kind of like on a limb recommendation, but I really enjoyed Land of the Lustrous. And the fact that they literally identify every gym person with they them pronouns, even in the subtitles, like it is like concretely.
Where can you watch that? Is it
I
on
feel like
Crunchyroll?
I feel like Amazon Prime
Okay.
is the only place that has it right now. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I feel like that is where I watched it. I know some people kind of feel uncomfortable by the fact that a lot of the gems look hyper feminine. But once again, I kind of fall back on there's really no wrong way to present yourself if you identify as non-binary. But I enjoyed it. It was very reaffirming to constantly hear so many characters referred to as they, them, them. Other than that, I really enjoyed Bloom Into You. That was a fun and sweet show that also explored some other sexual identities, but the main couple it focuses on are lesbians. I would like to see, personally, more shows that center around adults, and maybe that's just from my lack of research, but a lot of these things are geared towards high schoolers. Not to say, that doesn't help me classify some feelings, but other than that, Cardcaptor Sakura, Sailor Moon, and I just started watching Kase-san and Morning Glories earlier. I'm not finished with it, but I really like what I'm seeing, and once again, that focuses on a lesbian couple, and it is very thoughtful and very sweet, and apparently the manga dives into some more like intimate issues, and apparently they're handled very respectfully and very well. So I'm kind of excited to continue with that, but that's all I got.
I have one to add.
Okay.
Which I'm surprised also didn't come up. Maybe someone did say this, Wandering Sun, which is definitely, I think it's geared toward adults, honestly. Like, I think it's very much about handling, like, how children handling as adults how children handle these questions as much as it can be about helping children understand them themselves. So yeah, Wandering Sun is great.
I guess my advice for making the community a better place, how can I put this? I am a very non-confrontational person online, and I kind of echo Tori's sentiment of, like, it's not worth it. Like, if I see someone, like, saying something very, like, if I see someone saying something, it's like, this person is beyond what I can offer to make them a better person, this is not, like, this is above my pay grade, I either just ignore them or I block them. Like, it's just not worth. I feel like a lot of people tend to look for the negative, and I try not to do that. And that's more of like an online thing. But like when I think of this question, I think more of like in person, like at conventions or things like that. And I think it's just existing in the space for one, because like me and Tori like do panels with the podcast group. We are the only, to my knowledge, currently, we are the only queer people in the group, and I think just us doing panels and like speaking both about like the issues that we deal with or have interest in as queer people, or like completely unrelated to that, I think is very important. Just like letting people know that we're here and we exist, and that is both for like non-queer people who, you know, kind of need to see that we're into this stuff too and that we have a valued place, but also people who like younger fans who need to see that, yeah, we're here, it's okay. So I guess that's my advice. Just exist. Just vibe. That's my advice for everything. Just vibe. And then I guess for recommendations of stuff, I really enjoyed Go For It Nakamura, which is, again, the kind of, I'm tired, like Tori, I'm tired of like, okay, you're in high school. I was in high school over 10 years ago. Why don't any of these characters pay taxes yet? But it's very sweet, and it took me back to a place of like, oh, I remember these feelings when I was that age, and it's only like it's a one-shot manga. It's like 1 volume, so I would say that. I also echo Our Dreams at Dusk. I've only read 1 volume of that too, but I like what I've read, and I need to get the other 3 volumes. There is another, and I guess this is kind of going into my like problematic part, but there's a manga, and it had a short anime called My Life as a High School Fudanshi, or something like that. It's about a straight character. He is a straight guy, but he likes yaoi, and it's like 4-koma style stuff, and there are gay characters, and it's kind of like a back and forth between like what is fetishization, what is these characters just existing, and it's more comedic, so you do have that. There's one character I love who he is a very flamboyant gay character, and he's like, you think he's a stereotype, but then he's also like kind of like Makoto from Sailor Moon, where it's like, oh, he's also like, he's a chef and he loves to cook, but he also is like can beat up like yakuza or like delinquent boys who like try to, you know, give him shit. It's very fun. And my other problematic thing I recommend is a yaoi, and only read it if you know what it is, but it's called Sweetheart Trigger. And, like, even though there is, like, you know, scenes of an adult nature, it is also about college kids who are dealing with, like, one character is explicitly gay and the other is like, I think I might be bi and I might be into you, and we're going to figure that out. And it takes place in America. It is written by a Japanese mangaka, but it takes place at an American college with American college students, and I think the thing that made me love it is the guy like breaks up with the openly gay guy, and he goes and he listens to Lana Del Rey. Like, it's in there, like he is listening to Lana Del Rey, and I was like, wow,
amazing.
I'm so seen, and it's been officially licensed, so you have no excuse to pirate it. You go buy it now.
Gosh. You know, I feel like a total goof for not talking about Makoto and my, like, formulative characters. Just her whole struggle with, like, I'm kind of a tomboy, but I also like these traditionally feminine things, like cooking. And as I got older, like, I had that tomboy phase, and I think my family was just like, okay, well, eventually we're gonna get out of it, right? But as I started getting older, like, I still presented that way, but I found myself kind of falling into, like, traditionally feminine things like cooking and baking and crafting, and, you know, those aren't traditionally feminine things, but that kind of gets ingrained to us. But I just felt myself kind of gravitating towards her too, because she's just like, I'm a little masculine, but I want people to see me as cute and fun also.
For our last part of this podcast, we're going to be reading some questions and comments that we received from Twitter and Discord and other sources, basically I asked people, like, if you were an LGBTQ person and you're a fan of anime, like, what is your story with it? And I've also taken questions from other people that these are things we might have covered already, but I think it was good just to kind of do a retread. So first we have a letter from @ToriNatsuno on Twitter, and because this is someone named Tori, I thought it'd be fun to have our own Tori read this letter for us.
Okay, nice name, first of all. So, they say, just wanted to tell a story about how Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura have influenced me personally and a lot of kids from ex-USSR countries in the late 90s and early thousands. I hate this label, ex-USSR. I'm personally from Ukraine, but the influence of these anime go beyond Ukraine, Russia, or Belarus, etc. It would be hypocritical of me to say that these shows had influence only in Ukraine. Anyway, my personal story. My family wasn't homophobic or anything. I guess the first time I heard about gays was when my father was showing me Queen's videos. I'm assuming music videos. So when I was watching Sailor Moon as a kid, I had seen Haruka and Michiru and was like, oh, they love each other. Okay. And then there were Starlights in season 5, and I was like, oh, so a person can be female and male at the same time. I'm okay with that. Something like this was also in Cardcaptor Sakura and many other clamp works that I've discovered later. I was actually surprised later that there were a lot of homophobic people around who were shocked by characters from anime. I also remember after I watched those animes, I had thought that if I ever liked a girl, I would be totally okay with it. And fun thing, that it wasn't only my thoughts. People from different cities and countries that I've met later that also were growing up on the same shows as I did have exactly the same thoughts. I guess that's all I wanted to share with you guys. Thank you for your attention. Regards, Tori.
Oh.
That is very sweet. And I'm going to assume that you were probably younger as well when these shows were airing. And that's why I say I wish people gave kids more credit because, like, it's really not hard to understand these concepts. And I'm glad that you were able to meet other like-minded people who made you feel, I guess I'd say, more secure in those thoughts. I think that's always really, really helpful.
So our next set of questions come from Quackbar on our Third Impact Anime Discord server. So Quackbar asks, why does LGBT plus culture in anime feel so detached from reality, and when do you think that will change? Does anyone want to field that first, or?
I don't know.
I was gonna say, you probably have the same answer as me.
This is another thing where I feel like it's I feel like an old man commenting on this because I'm so, like, unfamiliar with, like, newer anime. Because while, like, a lot of, like, older anime or anime that I watched growing up, like, has a lot of LGBT themes, I mean, they still feel... what's the word? Like, I don't even know. Like, I feel like it's still, like, very obvious that they're written by straight people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love all of the queer characters that are in Sailor Moon, but when you look at all of them, they're all stereotypical and problematic in their own way. And I remember, like, getting into this argument with somebody, and they're like, well, what about Yoshiki Usui, the fashion designer? He wasn't stereotypical. I'm like, hello, he was a fashion designer. Like, he was a gay. Why does the one gay side character have to be a fashion designer? And then there's, like, also, like, weird things, which thankfully I haven't seen too much of, but it's, like, the thing with, like, either, like, being gay is being seen as, like, this weird kinky perverted thing, or is, like married with, like, pedophilia, like you see with General Blue and Dragon Ball, which nobody wants. So, I mean, that's... I think it sometimes it might feel detached because they're not in the culture. They're seeing what they think is, their truth.
Mm-hmm.
Two things. One, we're kind of stuck within, like, time and place because, one, these are not really made for us. I mean, most, especially older anime, is not made for a Western audience, so we're always going to be kind of comparing them to our ideas of gay identity or queer identity. And I don't say, like, oh, Japan doesn't know anything. It's like, no, these are, like, Japan has its own queer community that has its own goals, values, ideas, that are different, not less or more, but different than our own, and we kind of have to leverage it with that. I mean, even like we were saying, X-gender is a term in Japan that is not, I don't even want to say equivalent to, I would say it is comparable to how we say non-binary. There are their own expectations or narratives behind that terminology that might carry similarities to what we call non-binary, but are still unique to that. And I think there will always be that disconnect because they are just two different cultures, that we will always kind of have differences. And like I am like Salvatore, like I don't really keep up with a lot of modern anime. Most of my interests are in stuff that is mostly from 2000 and below. I'm the one person who can watch Digipaint shows and not cringe. But and that's kind of a temporal lock where, you know, we're always looking at things that are going to not always age perfectly. Like what is progressive today may tomorrow be problematic, and that's not to say we shouldn't try. It's just that's the nature of things. Humanity is always learning about itself and, you know, our fellow creature. So I think there's kind of that. I mean, even with Sailor Moon, I loved that there was like a drama CD where Sailor Moon's like, ooh, Kunzite and Zoisite are like in love with each other and they're both men, and it's like Mercury like, you know, Usagi gay people are fine. The problem with them is they're just evil. And I think that's important. And that's very relatable. Like, what's wrong with me? It's not that I'm gay, it's that I'm just a horrible human being.
Yeah.
And you can separate those two things, right? Shockingly. I would just say, I don't think it's that, it's not that these shows are, I don't think it's that these shows are not made for a Western audience, because I think especially with modern anime, a lot of the time they are made with this kind of global, you know, this post-NAFTA globalist lens. Okay, I'm going to stop being from DC now. I think it's just, they're inherently made with a different cultural understanding. They're made by different people. They're made from a different place. And that stands for anything made by anyone. Like, no one is exactly the same as you. So nothing is ever gonna, I don't know, I hesitate to see when nothing is, I was gonna say nothing is ever not going to be an issue.
Art is messy.
Yeah. I mean, we make art about things precisely because they are at issue for us. So, I don't know. The concept of something not being an issue is I don't know. That's a meaty one for me.
So, Quackbar's next question is, anime that means the most to you as an LGBT plus person. I think
Sailor Moon.
Yeah, I feel like we're all just gonna be like, yeah, Sailor Moon.
I don't think Sailor Moon means the most to me. I think it means something. I don't think it means the most to me. I'm gonna be a contrarian.
What would you say is the one, like, or maybe another one in addition to Sailor Moon, if you can't pick one that is the most?
As an adult, I think it's really Stars Align and also Setazanmai. Setazanmai, I thought, was it's literally about, like, people being put in boxes at some level. Setazanmai is batshit. One, it's great. It's about ass eating. What more do you want?
And isn't it by Ikuhara?
That's what the kids love nowadays.
What?
Yes, I said that's what the kids love nowadays.
Yeah. It's like something that needs to be culturally, apparently.
It is Alex Jones.
It is
here.
an Ikuhara show.
It is an Ikuhara show. Yes.
He has never confirmed his sexuality, but I would almost, for that man to have such a decent grip on writing LGBT stories.
Well, so Akane Kazuki for Stars Align, he didn't really have any he said in the interview, the great interview on the Anime News Network, he didn't really have any grasp on X-gender or kind of anything outside of gay, lesbian before 5 years ago. So I think it's totally possible to not identify and still write meaningfully about things. But Ikuhara is, I don't know, Princess Tutu, man.
I would say that Ikuhara, like, whatever, he's still allowed. He's honorary. He's allowed to be with us.
He's fucking great. Yeah, he's great. But Setazanmai is very, I enjoy the, I'm gonna say flirtatious, like it kind of flirts with it flirts with like gender and sexuality in a way that you do when you're like 13. Like that's what you're doing in a way. You're testing, you're experimenting, you're seeing what works for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that it gives its characters kind of room to do that. So as an adult, the only things that mean the most to me are the things that mean the most to me right now. So there we go.
Quackbar's last question is anime that you feel like has the best LGBT plus representation.
It's weird. So I don't think it's the best LGBT representation, but I really, really, really liked Natsuko and Honey's relationship in the new Cutie Honey universe. Because so you probably know, I was not a fan of Universe at all. I literally complain about it every chance I get. But I really liked how their relationship was depicted. Because I think so many people, they really praise Natsuko and Honey and Cutie Honey, which I can't stand, and there's not enough time in the day to get on about it right now. But I don't know, I felt like their relationship seemed very neutral and realistic in Universe, so I really liked that, because it didn't seem overly fetishized, which is weird to say about Cutie Honey, because usually everything is fetishized. But I don't know, it felt realistic, and I think that's what I thought was really good representation. Yeah, because I feel like every other, every other thing is either too stereotypical or I find too many, problems with it. But I don't know, I thought that they were a great couple in that, and I thought that was a good representation. It's the one good thing I'll say about that show.
So, Basil from the Awesome Cast, who made sure when he asked these questions that he was like, I'm straight, I don't really have an audience here, or a stake here, but I said, it's fine. I wanted to get questions from as many people, because I think it's interesting to have people who are outside of our community or outside of our experiences still ask questions. And I think this one is important. What do you look for in representation?
A happy ending.
Yeah.
No.
I think it's so hard for gay men to find happiness in fiction, not even just in anime. I think, in all types of media, there's so many, Moonlight, Call Me by Your Name, Giovanni's Room, none of them really end happily ever after. So I want to look for that in representation. It'd be nice for gay couples to stay together and be happy.
I feel like for me, I'm kind of in a privileged place to say this, but honestly, if you're not going to give it to me in a way that's natural and not if that is the character's only contribution to the narrative other than being an actual person, I'd rather just not have it at all, if that makes sense. I know that might be vaguely kind of problematic, but I just like characters that are treated like people rather than one of their characteristics, I suppose. I want them to be acknowledged. I don't want Disney to give me this one-liner that they're going to censor out somewhere else. But I just want thoughtfulness and understanding to go into it.
I think for me, I'm looking for characters, I am a terrible navel gazer in that I'm always looking for myself in fiction, so I guess I'm looking for characters who, that I can connect with, and for me, a lot of that is characters who, they are more than just, I am the token homosexual in the cast. I mean, there are some that I love, I love Liron in Gurren Lagann, because I really love that statement that he says in, one of the first episodes, I'm kind of a man and I'm kind of a woman. And I love that, and for me, I latched on that character specifically because I'm like, yes, these are feelings I share, and I like seeing someone like that. And I kind of also go to, Yuri on Ice, which is also a complicated subject. But one thing I loved about Yuri on Ice is they are a couple, but, the weird gender dynamics don't really play into it as much. They're ice skaters. They are professional ice skaters, but it's not necessarily this is the man and this is the woman, or okay, we have to buck the stereotype, they're both manly men because going in the exact opposite direction is perfect. It's no, these I know couples who are like Yuri and Victor in real life where they're both kind of gay and they're also not only gay. It's they're very realistic. I know people like that. Victor is a very artistic again, an ice skater, and Yuri is not exactly the most, like, macho guy in the world and is also an ice skater, but they don't feel like... I don't know, like, I just really loved, like, they felt like a realistic couple that I could, like, know in real life, and I like that.
I was just going to say in regards to Yuri on Ice, if I remember the interview correctly, Sayo Yamamoto kind of tried to explain the queer baiting as if she made it any more explicit, she wouldn't have gotten a decent television spot, like a time spot. And I know she works really, really hard on what she does, so I can kind of understand not wanting her show relegated to, like, 5 in the morning or something. Not to say that that is correct for her to have done, but also, like, I can sort of maybe understand what she was doing.
I mean, Victor is literally based on John Cameron Mitchell and Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Like, I feel like she, I don't think she's doing it in a, like, in a wrong,
malicious way.
And I could also see that...
Subtext is bursting there.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I love in the interview, like, I almost highlighted it in my little booklet that came with the Blu-ray. Like, I went to see Hedwig and the Angry Inch and saw John Cameron Mitchell as Hedwig and said, this is the character I want for my anime. And I saw that, I was like, I knew it and I love it like that.
She's great.
Just...
Yeah, she's a wild lady.
Yeah. So... oh, go ahead, Meta.
Oh, I was going to say, I am probably going to go in a different direction and say that I just want, like, messy... I don't know, I want messy LGBTQ characters, but not victimized LGBTQ characters. Like, I just want to see... I don't know. This is a hard question. Why did I start answering this question? Like, I just want to see them be people and have their own, like, insecurities and, like, have their own... fuck-ups with regard to their identities and sexualities and not have everything be perfect and figured out.
More gay villains.
Yeah, I don't think there's... Yeah.
That's all we have is gay villains.
Yeah, we're swimming in gay villains. Come on.
I want more!
I want, like, boring gay couples. I think we need to, like, be reminded that gay people can be boring.
Fan fiction, man.
Slow
Place
burn
for
coffee
you.
shop AUs.
And what about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of, like, boring messiness, not, like, I want to end the world messiness. So,
Yes.
I can't define messiness very well.
Maybe, like, something like they exist more to be victimized or more to be like, I'm here to teach you, I'm here to turn around the chair and rap about queerness.
Yeah. So, in a story, like, in an original story I've been working on, you know, it's like, one of the characters is, the main character is, like, Buddhist. She's Buddhist. And then I was having so much trouble writing it. And at some point, you know, I was having so much trouble writing it because I studied Buddhism for, like, 6 years. And I, you know, was referencing books and, like, making sure that I was, like, getting it right. And at some point I was like, oh, she doesn't have to be a fucking, like, good Buddhist. Like,
Yeah.
she can just be, like, a bad, like, shitty American, like, misreading it all, like, Western Buddhist. And that's still, like, a valuable... Yeah, so that's kind of what I mean by messy, is just not, you know, like, propaganda.
This is off topic, and I'll be really brief. I'm sorry again. I can't believe none of us have mentioned Pet Shop of Horrors throughout this entire thing.
Oh my god, I
Has anyone
love
else read
Pet
it
Shop
besides
of
me?
Horrors.
I
mean, because the whole thing is that had so many queer themes, and, like, Count D is non-binary. Like, that was, like, the big reveal at the end of the manga. like him and his family. But no, that's such I'm so mad at myself. It's because I don't own it anymore. But yeah, that's such an important queer manga. That's in my recommendations.
I have only seen the OVA series, and I have like the second volume of the manga because I will. I think Austin gave it to me, but like there's a used bookstore that like it'll pop up in every so often. I'll try to get it like as I find it. I have not read the full manga though, but I do love Count D and Pet Shop of Horrors. It's very. I don't know if this will stay in the final edit, but kids, if it is, listen, go watch/read Pet Shop of Horrors. Read it before you watch it. The manga is better.
I can't believe nobody has ever like relicensed it or anything. And there's like 5 sequels now or something. They've expanded it so much. But anyway, yes, Pet Shop of Horrors is fantastic. I'm sorry for the minor spoiler.
I mean, if it's very obvious, it's not really that big of a reveal. Like I think a customer calls Count D a slur within the first episode. I was like, oh, you're family. So the next question is, when positive representation happens, how does that make you feel? And negative representation.
Good and bad.
Yeah. I mean, kind of go to my
like.
Oh, go ahead, Tori.
Relieved for positive, and then negative. I at least try to like deconstruct it after the like immediate disgust. But I mean, yeah, good and bad is the short.
There is I haven't watched it yet, but there is an adaptation of Sherlock Holmes that's an anime, and I know David Wald is in it as a bearded drag queen, and that's enough to get me into watching it, but apparently, I don't care if I spoil it because it sounds terrible, they do the Jack the Ripper case, and it is a transgender woman murdering women for their wombs. I'm like, one, Black Butler did that problematic.
Whoa.
They did that problematic storyline 10 years ago, and two, that's also still
very
horrible.
Silence of the Lambs.
What the fuck?
It's like we've did Silence of the Lambs. You couldn't stop.
Yeah. What show is this again?
It has a very stupid title. Like it's like Numbers, but it's like a modern adaptation of Sherlock Holmes, and like it won me with like Mrs. Hudson is now a flamboyant.
It's not Sherlock Kabukicho, is it?
It is. That's the name of it.
Okay.
Because it has like a number name too. It has like 3 different
Yeah, I
names.
know.
I
looked at it and I was like, I'm not doing this.
It's like I've seen enough.
It tries to be very edgy.
I've seen enough butcherings of the Sherlock canon. I'll have you know. Like I read the original stories.
Pun intended.
Oh god. But yeah, it's things like that. Like I read that because I was reading a review for it to see if I wanted to watch it. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do this. Like,
Tired sigh.
Yeah.
Mrs. Hudson as a drag queen who's lovely is not worth dealing with the horrible transphobia that this person, again, it has been done. We have built this bridge and gotten past it. It's 2020.
True.
So, what are your, next question, what are your thoughts on the different cultural norms between the US and Japan when it comes to LGBT plus things? Is there anything we can learn from Japan or them from the United States?
I don't pretend to understand other countries' governments, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to act smart like I do, but one thing that stuck out to me when I was watching those comparison videos earlier is that even some of the people that were disapproving or just did not understand, like they were coming from a place of ignorance for their disapproving, none of them were angry. Like, none of them were like, I'm gonna kill all these people and they're gonna burn in hell for being gay. It was just like, yeah, I don't approve, but that's their life, I guess. Which, honestly, I would rather have over somebody telling me that, you know, they're going to assault the lesbian out of me or whatever. So
I feel like there's a cultural difference there, though, possibly on how direct
that is also very true.
any one person will be about anything.
Yes, that is also very, very true. But I also did notice as well that they were advocating for middle schoolers and high schoolers to have more LGBT education, whereas, like, you know, that's blasphemy here in the United States. And on the LGBT side of the video, someone was saying that, like, I think if gay celebrities came out as gay, that people would see it as a more normalized thing, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of actually probably a good idea.
I think Western fans might do a better job to understand and support the fact that people, like Japanese people within Japan, are doing good and hard work to to make things better for LGBTQ people, and not, erase them utterly from their discussions of the country.
Yes.
Yeah, I because of my interest in Japanese media and then being a gay person, like I've done and I take no stance that I know I'm an expert. Like, this is really just my own personal interest. I've done like a lot of research into like Japanese queer culture, and I think that what we should do is like learn and not speak. I actually have a huge issue that a lot of the queer material about Japan in English is coming from like one academic who, it's like, great, thanks. Is there anyone else?
Yeah. And they're usually,
He did put out one book that's literally just translations of like actual things from queer people. It's a very fascinating book. It's a little old. I think it came out in like 2003. I think just listening to the voices that come out of Japan and realize like it's very easy for us as people in America especially to kind of dominate the conversation and think that we are the arbiters of queer identity because we're the loudest. And I think by consuming media by queer people from Japan or queer Japanese speakers that we are and listening instead of speaking over them, I think that is where we kind of learn the empathy. And also there are so many ways that non-heterosexual, non-cisgender identities are expressed and understood, and it's very much based in culture and history. And every civilization, every society has their own culture and history that are going to inform those things. And I think just embracing that difference and that diversity is part of it. Like, I love the idea of like folk genders. Like, there are genders that we cannot taxonomize in our Western ideas because they are so based in other cultures, and I think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful that there are ways of being that are kind of born out of something like bigger than yourself.
Are you talking about like I think it's the native belief of two spirits?
Things like that, yes. I mean, we could very easily say, oh, well, that's this or that's that, but no, it is its own thing, and I think giving it that space is important. I would not identify as a two-spirit person because that is not my place to. That is something that is for those people, and I think that's important to listen to that voice and to amplify that voice. I mean, like I said, like X-gender, we can roughly say it is like non-binary, but it's born out of a different set of circumstances, and I think, like, I would not say I am an X-gender person because I feel like that's not my identity claim. So this is from Anonymous. I figure you would have already talked about this, but if you haven't, do you have any thoughts or feelings about the anime communities in regards to LGBTQ, maybe responses to controversy or fetishization, anything that comes to mind? Sorry if that's too vague. I think we've kind of really well covered this topic in our conversation. Fetishization is a very complicated topic, and we all have, I think we're of the same mind that empathy is the answer to, both hatred and fetishization. I don't know. I hope I'm not speaking over anybody when I say that. So this is from Tori's friend Adrienne. What are some good series involving queer characters created by queer people, aside from my lesbian experience with loneliness?
Our Dreams at Dusk.
Our Dreams at Dusk.
My brother's husband.
I will add one more. I think it is created by a gay man. What Did You Eat Yesterday, which is about a gay couple. And it is like about like every day the husband, one of them comes home with a new like meal to make, and so that's why it's named that. I think it has been and it's interesting because it's about like a man. One of them is a lawyer and one of them is a hairstylist. It's a very interesting thing, and it got a live action drama, and I think it has been licensed, but I don't know by who. But I'm pretty sure if you were to Google it, I think it at least got like an ebook release, so I would look it up.
And I'm sure there are more out there that we're just not aware of because not every author or artist feels comfortable disclosing their identity. So who knows, we could have read something that is potentially and just not known.
And our last set of questions come from Booksachi on Twitter. What are some aspects of being LGBTQ plus that you think are underrepresented in anime that you would like to see more titles explore?
I would just like to see it more normalized. I think that like all of the queer or most of the queer characters I've seen, like it's kind of like that's their defining feature is that they're queer. I mean, it would be nice to just like watch a show where like, you know, there's a gay couple and they're just a couple. They're not seen as a gay couple. Or, you know, less like being the butt of the joke or being overly sexualized, because that was like a big thing in Sailor Moon, is that like all of the gay characters were all either very like sexual or they were like overly affectionate, that, you know, like you have Haruka and Michiru like making comments about like, you know, no more bed talk or all that. But it's like no heterosexual couple talks like that in the show.
Yeah, I think having LGBTQ identity not be a plot point but still be present is great. Yeah, it doesn't need to be like it seems that if there's an LGBTQ character, it's either the entire focus of the show or it's kind of this like lately it's not a joke, but it's not a joke.
Yeah.
So it's very quickly written off. So yeah, just seeing it there but not made a big deal of would be nice.
And that's kind of some of the sentiments that I was expressing earlier, but for me personally, I think some of the more, I don't know how to refer to them as, but some of the, I don't feel right saying niche, but some of the other sexualities, I feel like we get a lot of stories about lesbian couples or gay couples or trans couples or people, but further identities don't necessarily really come to light. And I feel like as somebody who might not necessarily know somebody that identifies that way or quite might not understand the dynamics of that identity, I'd be interested to see somebody who would be a content creator who does identify that way, kind of bringing that into a story. So I don't know. I don't know what sexuality to give as an example, but I think maybe you kind of understand where I'm going.
Yeah. And one thing you point out, like, also there's a huge emphasis on, like, couples, like a gay couple,
Yes.
a lesbian couple, or, like, someone in a relationship with a transgender person. It's never just, like, or rarely it's them on their own, unless it's a joke. Like, oh, this is our token person to, like, laugh at, and that's their only trait. But never like, oh, they're single, they're not necessarily with someone, and it's like a side thing. Like, oh, they're also gay. Like, or they're also trans. It's always like, that's their entire personality, or they're with another person to make it also their entire personality. It's that weird, like, queer people only exist in relation to other people because it's about, like, sexuality or how other people perceive your gender identity or expression. There always has to be an audience to play off of, to exist in a weird way.
Yeah.
So, the last question we have, thankfully, is what are some moments or characters that just absolutely nailed it for you? Like, yes, this show gets it. Gets in all caps.
You in Stars Align. That's my constant.
I mean, do they mean like scenes that we identified with, or just like series or scenes that like were proper representation? Or
I think that one.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like what was something that really clicked for you.
I mean, one of the things that drew me into MW was seeing Father Garai's guilt every time he would have sex and with Yuki, and you'd always be over dramatic. He goes, oh God, please judge my soul. I know I'll burn forever. But would continue to have sex with Yuki, and then also continue to do other horrible things like help him commit murders, and just be like, well, you know, it's in God's hands. Maybe not the murdering part I identify with, but I remember like that weird guilt, because I was raised Catholic, not like heavily or anything, but like I had like a weird guilt about being gay, and that was probably like a big part of it. There was also a scene in Stop Hibari-kun where Kosa-kun and Hibari, they had to pretend to be a couple to trick someone, and they were going to pretend to kiss, and Hibari like breaks down crying and just says like, I know that I'm actually a boy, but I don't want to pretend to kiss you. I actually want to kiss you. And I remember being a teenager being like, oh shit, that's me. That really hurts. Like, so I don't know if that answers it, but yeah.
For me, it was not in an anime, but it was in an anime musical, so I think that counts. In the Sailor Moon Super's musical, the one from the 90s, there's a scene where the Amazon trio are hanging out after meeting Usagi and her friends in the Amazon bar, and Fisheye goes, oh, Mamoru, this guy is my type. I want to go after him. And they're like, what? Aren't you a boy? And Fisheye, who is also played by a woman, it's very weird, goes, yes, I'm a boy and I like other boys. What of it? And that was just like, wow, just galaxy brain. And I cite that moment as like a very important moment, like this very 90s, very kitschy musical where Fisheye, played by a woman, goes, I'm a boy and I like other boys, like, do you want to fight about it?
Is that the one where everyone was played by, like, a woman played everyone?
I mean, all of the Sailor Moon musicals
female
are
cast.
very like that, but no, this was, only Tiger's Eye and Tuxedo Mask are the only male actors in that one, I think. But yeah, they did a very similar story in the newer one where it is a Takarazuka style all-female cast.
That's what it is.
I would say that moment, and then there's this really terrible, okay, it's not bad, but no one remembers it, anime from 2004 called Doki Doki School Hours, and there is a gay character who he gets a nosebleed every time he's near his crush, and it's very dumb and cute, and I liked that when I was in high school. So there you go. Minor sad. On the note of minor sad, I think we've kind of hit the end of our show, so I want to thank Salvatore and Meta for being on and, really getting into the nitty-gritty of what it means to be LGBTQ in the anime fandom in 2020. So I'm going to start with Meta. Where can people follow you, and what are the projects you're working on that you want to plug?
Oh man, people can follow me at Meta and Potatoes. It's like meat and potatoes, but Meta and Potatoes on Twitter, and I think also Tumblr, but I don't use Tumblr anymore. Don't go there. So right now, in addition to, like 1,400 writing projects, I am working on the Onigiri Miya fanzine, which is a cookbook focused on Inarizaki and other volleyball players from the Haikyuu anime and manga. And you can find more information about that at onigirimiya.card with 2 R's.co. And that's onigiri like the rice ball and Miya, Miya. Please buy it when it comes out. And please read my stories when I post them on Twitter. My first one is being published next month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was very long. I'm doing a lot.
And Salvatore, where can people find you and the stuff that you're making?
I'm on most social media platforms under RetroSofa, except for on Instagram because someone stole that name before I got to Instagram. On Instagram, I am retrosofa.inc, that's INC. But on Twitter, Tumblr, I'm RetroSofa. I am on Tapas. You can read my comic on there, No More Mermaids. So it's Tapas, tapas.io/RetroSofa. In addition, I'm also working on projects with Discotek Media. I have a few series that I'm doing the subtitle editing for. And I actually have, my comic got picked up by an Italian publisher, so I'm working on that too.
Whoa.
So.
Congrats.
Thank you, yeah.
Tori, where can people find you?
I am over on Twitter at Worst Waifu, usually screaming about anything I'm doing at one given moment.
It's good. That's very you.
I have no projects other than making crafts in my bedroom alone, so...
You can find me on Twitter at Calvakun, that is CALVA_KUN, and you can find me at the same name on Instagram, just without the underscore, because I don't know why. And I don't have anything like anime related because the only thing I'm working on getting published is a dumb literary analysis for a book written in the 1890s that no one cares about. So, yeah. So, again, I want to thank our guests, Meta and Salvatore, for being on. with us today, and I will make sure to link all of their creative projects in the show notes so that you can find them and support them. With that, thank you for listening to this podcast and listening to us complain about our sad gay lives.